So for me, the real decision between which way you want to publish your book, which way is right for you to publish your book, is really up to you. I love traditional for entrepreneurs. I love traditional for experts. If you don't want to grow an audience, then self-publishing and hybrid publishing can be really great options, right? You're here for your dreams. You're listening to this podcast for your dreams. So I want to be truthful. I want to tell you that because it is the truth. I've had authors be very successful despite what you may have heard or seen in a Facebook ad. There is absolutely no right way to publish. That's because your right way to publish your book depends on your goals. Today, I'm going to share the 3 most common ways that entrepreneurs and experts become authors. I'm going to share a ton of stories and, as usual, offer some unsolicited advice so that you can decide for yourself how you want to publish your book. So, there are 3 primary ways to publish your book. The first is self publishing, the second is hybrid publishing, and the third, which I work in and love, is traditional publishing. So let's start with self publishing. This is also sometimes called independent publishing, or the authors that choose to do it call themselves indie authors. I've seen that a lot. So the pro to self publishing is pretty obvious. There's a really low barrier to entry. There is absolutely almost no barrier to entry sometimes, right? Right now, if I wanted to publish myself as an author, I could take a Word document, go to Kindle Direct Publishing on Amazon and publish that shit, right? Like I could. I don't want to. I have a lot of reasons why I wouldn't do that, but I could. The other big thing that you'll see on the internet about self-publishing is that you as the author get to retain all the rights and profits. People make this out to be a way bigger deal than it is in reality, and that most books sell less than 500 copies, particularly self-published books. So this isn't such a big deal unless you tend to hit you unless you become an exception, which I'm going to tackle in a future episode, but really unless you become Colleen Hoover or E.L. James or someone like that, it's very unlikely that this is going to matter as much. The big con to self-publishing is that what I find most often is that people don't understand they need to do everything themselves. So they don't understand that they need to do all the editing or hire someone to help. They don't understand that they need to do the cover and interior design. Basically, in short, people don't understand how much work putting together a book really is. They also underestimate the amount of promotion that needs to happen and marketing that needs to happen, both before the book is available and well after it. And they also really, really, really underestimate how self publishing affects the rest of your career. So, what I want to say right off the bat is that self published authors cannot usually, again, most of you are not the exception, leverage that into a traditional book deal. So, it used to be the case that you could. As late as like 2017, 2018, 2019, you could. I have famously helped a couple of entrepreneurs to do this, namely Denise Duffield Thomas. I don't think Denise would bother, mind me dropping her name here. But Denise had 2 previous self-published books that did really, really well. And, we leveraged that into a book deal with Hay House. Like, that's awesome. But that doesn't happen as much anymore. And she had sold a lot of copies, tens of thousands of copies. So what happens more often is that a author self-publishes with the idea that they might get a book deal later on or that a traditional publisher might pick up that book, but that's not going to happen, particularly if there were low sales. So if there's less than, 10, 20,000 copies sold, which is the case for most self-published books, like there's not really a future for you to have another path to getting your book published. It's just sort of the unfortunate thing. It can kind of kill your whole career. Another big con in my mind to self-publishing your book is that there's really limited distribution. So you're not going to see your book in independent bookstores for the most part. Outside your local area, certainly a local bookstore might be like, hey, yeah, we'll stock a local self-published author, but for the most part, independent bookstores are not going to stock your book. You're certainly not going to be in airport stores or Anthropology or any of those kind of places where you occasionally see books. It's very, very unlikely with self-publishing. So those are our pros and cons. So in my mind, self-publishing still does work for some people. It is really great for memoirs because memoirs have an uphill climb in terms of getting a traditional book deal, and a lot of people want to write them. And so if that's your case, or you're writing like a family history, something like that, could be great for self-publishing. Niche markets and expertise also do great in this world, as do what I call kind of odd formats, meaning that your book is short or long or a journal or something like that, right? The Shadow Work Journal did really, really well because it's sort of a unique book in the self-publishing space. So, a positive example of someone who self published very successfully is my client, Darrow Kirkpatrick. Darrow is an expert in the FIRE community, so financial independence, retire early. And he did exactly that. He retired early, and he wrote a book about how to save for retirement, how to master that, how to get early retirement. And he had us, when he came to me, he had a plan. He had a series, I think, of 3 to 5 books, and they were all topic based, so individual topics. His first one was "Can I Retire Yet?", which is a great title for a book. And it was literally like 5 little short 20, 30, 40,000 word books on these individual finance topics. He was talking to a niche market that he had direct access to, this online fire community. His book was a little short, his audience was small but niche and engaged, and he really wanted to self-publish. And so he did so very successfully. I think his book sold thousands of copies because he used a lot of great promotional tactics, and he gave the manuscript early to people in the community that were influential. He did a really great job. And so it really worked for him. Now, a flip example is a friend of mine who got, big stars in her eyes about writing a how-to book about what she had learned on her own personal growth journey. And when she put it out, it was crickets. No one really paid attention. It didn't get reviewed anywhere. It didn't get profiled anywhere. Kind of nothing changed for her. And she told me later that she wished she had talked to me about it, or that she wished she had slowed her roll a little bit in terms of when she published and who she published with. And I hear that a lot from my audience of like, I really regret this, or I wish I had known more, or I wish I had done my homework, or I wish I had met you before I did this. The other thing too is that I hear pretty often about authors that were scammed, meaning that, a publisher promised them the world and was essentially a self-publisher, or what we used to call a vanity press. I don't know if y'all remember this, but when I was a kid, you used to be able to like pay to have your poetry published in a book, and it was basically a vanity project where you would pay them like $50 or $100, and they'd put your poem along all these other uncurated pay to play stuff. A lot of publishers now operate that way that are like independent publishers. So just, beware. And there's a great website for this, Writer Beware, that will help you with this if you are going the self-publishing market. So the next option is hybrid publishing. So hybrid publishing is kind of a pay to play model, but in a very legit way. So the pro side of this is that hybrid publishers, which include Fast Company Press, Forbes, Forbes Advantage, Greenleaf, trying to think of some other ones. Authors Equity is technically a hybrid publishing place, although they tend to work with traditional publishers more in that model because they're all traditional publishing vets. These places offer professional quality books without the barriers to entry of a traditional publisher. So it can be a really great way to publish your book in a legit way that looks the same as a traditional publisher, just doesn't require the proposal and sort of the rigmarole of getting an agent, all of that. The con is that can be just as expensive as other options. Hybrids often still have limited distribution, so they still might not be able to get into bookstores. They still might not be able to get you into an airport. And you're still really responsible for all the marketing, the promotion, the sales, right? That's sort of a through line in all 3 of these options, to be fair. But with hybrid, sometimes I've heard anywhere from 25,000 to $100,000 packages, which isn't outrageous in terms of like helping you publish a book, especially if you get 100% of the royalty and the earnings on the back end. But it is a big cost for a lot of people, and so you want to take that into consideration. So hybrid honestly is best for people who don't want a traditional deal, right? For people who do want that total creative control, but who don't want to self-publish, who don't want to project manage the whole thing, and those certainly who are willing to pay to get a high quality book. It also works really, really well for a niche market in terms of like, I have a client who's an executive coach. She works with a specific type of tech founder in a specific like time of their companies. So that's niche of a niche of a niche. It's great for her to like sign up with Forbes books, which is what she did, right? So it's a great option. And so it's really, really helpful. So I have a positive example and a negative example for this, of course, too. So my positive example is a book called Choose FI, which is one of the best finance books I've ever worked on. And it is by the guys behind the brand Choose FI. FI is financial independence. I got really into this fire community for a little while. I was like the editor for all the fire books, which was fun. They're too frugal for me personally, but they're really, really smart. So they did a great job, right? They hired me, they hired a cover designer, they hired a proofreader, copy editor, interior designer, everything they possibly could. And they went with a hybrid press and they sold a lot of copies. A negative example is honestly someone who gets ripped off by a less than legit publisher. There are publishers out there. I think one of the biggest ones that is no longer in business the same way it used to be is Scribe Media. I've heard great things about Scribe. I've heard terrible things about Scribe from both people that were customers and people that work there. But you just want to be wary of people that publish, like promise you the world, right? One year we had 100% success rate. And my assistant at the time was like, we should put that on our website. And I was like, fuck no. Because I don't, even if we have it this year, we probably won't have it next year, right? So you want to make sure that you're watching out for that kind of too good to be true marketing. Because most often than not in book publishing, it is too good to be true. You just want to make sure that's not the case. And that's especially true with hybrid publishers because really it's the wild, wild west out there of hybrid and self publishing. And so you kind of never know what you're going to get. So just be careful and do your due diligence and look on, author beware, writer beware, the scammy writer sites and in those communities can be really, really helpful. And we'll put some of those in our show notes for you today to help you in case you do decide to go the hybrid route. Also, the risk with hybrid is that you spend all that money and like you still don't sell a lot of books, so you don't get an ROI on it. And that most often is then you and your platform. We had a client once who really wanted a traditional deal. We told her she needed to grow her platform. She kind of didn't. And then she ended up at a hybrid press and she didn't sell very many copies, and that's directly related to her audience building. And so if you haven't listened to the episode on platform yet, you should, because that's like so important to the success of your book overall. Okay, so the third option in terms of how you publish your book is my favorite, obviously, because I work in it, traditional publishing. So there's a few pros here. The number one thing is they pay you, right? It's essentially a profit share where the advance is given to you as an advance on earnings. So on future earnings, almost like a check into cash, a little bit of like, here's some money for you to go write your book. And then when, we all make money, we'll split the royalties, we'll split the profits. I'll do a whole episode on how advances work because people get it all kinds of twisted. But essentially, outside of hiring someone like me, which we got a great question from Becky on this, so I'm going to answer in an upcoming episode. Thank you, Becky. Other than investing in a proposal with someone like me, your agent's going to work on commission, the publisher's going to pay you. And so, you kind of have a limited investment going in. You also get professional help with editing, production, distribution. And because of that, traditionally published books tend to sell more. So you end up in those independent bookstores, you end up in the airports, you end up in everywhere books are sold is literally something we say, but it's true. And so you end up everywhere you could possibly be. So it's a little bit chicken and egg though, because in order to get a book deal, you obviously need to have the 3 Ps. You need to have that potential, you need to have that platform, and you need to have a proposal. And the biggest piece there often is that substantial audience, right? That's the biggest piece that is the heaviest lift, that takes the most time. and that it's the most investment for you as the author in terms of your time and money. And the publisher needs that because they need to know that you're going to sell enough copies to recoup their investment. And they invest a lot of money. If they're paying you, let's say $100,000, they're investing at least $150,000. So they're already in the red on day one with you at $250,000, right? So it's a big investment. You want to make sure that you can sell at least 20,000 copies, if not more like 30, and sometimes more in that first year. So the big con, so those are all the pros, right? They pay you, you get all this professional help. You get to say that you have a six-figure book deal. You get to say you're published by Penguin Random House. You get to be fancy like that. The con is that there's a super high barrier to entry. The gatekeeping is real, right? And even in traditional publishing, you are still responsible for promotion, for marketing, for sales. You still have to build that platform and leverage it, right? So this is why traditional publishing is best for entrepreneurs and experts with large audiences, as well as like corporate consultants and experts that do a lot of facilitation, speaking, and travel. And essentially everyone who wants to be the go-to expert in their niche or expand into press, film, or TV. So like if you want to go big and that is your goal, then traditional publishing is the way to go because you are going to sell more books and you can leverage your proposal, or not leverage your proposal. You can leverage your platform into book sales. It's very simple to do that. Also, if you want to be a bestseller, this is really your best bet. We're going to talk more about bestsellers in the next episode, episode 9, but traditionally published books tend to be bestsellers way more often than self-published books. It really has to be that exception in the self and hybrid publishing world in order to hit a bestseller list, right? And I'm not talking about Amazon bestsellers here because that is bullshit. I'll get into that more on episode 9. So let's talk about so many positive examples on traditional publishing. So someone that comes to mind, because she's promoting her second book, actually, is my client and friend, Melody Wilding. So Melody got a book deal with Chronicle for her first book, Trust Yourself, which is an amazing book. Go check it out. And she's publishing her second book, Managing Up. So Melody had a unique expertise. She had coaching. She wanted to build her platform. She wanted to expand it. And, she's perfect for it. It's a perfect book. It was a needed niche audience, but it was big enough of a niche to matter. And it was just really a great, great book. So it made a lot of sense. And she had a very positive experience. Her first book sold well enough. It wasn't like a big bestseller or anything, but it has sold well enough over the last few years for her to get a second book deal. And so that's really awesome. Now, a negative example, and I will say that majority of my clients have that positive experience. Okay, so I'm pausing here, guys, because if you're on YouTube, you will see my dog wants to get in my lap. She's not going to say no for an answer. So Madison is on the YouTube putting her little nose on the microphone. So if you hear a little weirdness, that's what that is. We'll see if my podcast producer cuts this out for the audio version, but if you don't, that's a good reason to throw on YouTube if you want to see a cute dog. Maybe we'll put a picture in the show notes if this ends up in the audio version. So the majority of my clients have had a positive experience with traditional publishers. That being said, if you've heard horror stories, you're not wrong. Those people are not wrong. Usually they are edge cases. Usually they are anomalies, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So I had a client and she's lovely and she did not deserve this treatment at all. But what happened with her is that her literary agent got fired from a literary agency that she was at, which is unfucking heard of. It's the only time it's ever happened to one of my clients. I've been a freelancer now I've been independent for 13 years almost. And then, I was in book publishing for eight years before that. Yes, 8 years before that, working in-house. And it's the first time I had ever heard of that. Okay, so it's really, really rare. So that happened. She stuck around with the agency because the agency was awesome. And she loved her editor, but then her editor left too. And she got handed off to someone junior, which is unfortunate, but it does happen. So that's what happened, is that she lost her agent, she lost her editor, which is pretty upsetting. And then the publisher she was at and didn't really see her journey through in the way they could have. And that was disappointing to her too, right? Because she had all these high hopes and expectations that didn't come true. So that's really unfortunate. Her book still did well. Last time I checked it, it sold over 40,000 copies. But like ultimately, the experience wasn't the experience she wanted. And that to me is a negative outcome. So that's the exception, but it can happen. That being said, it's really rare to lose your agent and your editor. That's like a double whammy that very does not happen very often. Okay. So I want to take a minute and just knock out a couple of the big rumors that I hear a lot and the big misconceptions I hear all the time. So if you're anything like my clients, you may have heard that traditional publishers will steal your ideas, restrict your business somehow, or take all of your money. And none of that is true. Publishers are in the business of intellectual property. So actually, they operate completely the opposite. A traditional book deal will help you promote and leverage your ideas, grow your business, and they'll pay you up front, right? So it's all good that way. The big thing about restricting your business, they are going to do stuff that they're going to ask you not to like create a product or a service that directly conflicts with book sales. Duh, they're going to protect their investment, right? They're not going to want you to give away a bunch of shit for free. That's not what they're going to do. So there's a few restrictions there, but for the most part, they don't want to restrict your business. They certainly don't want to steal your money. They got enough of their own, and they don't want to take your ideas. It's like not how they operate. And they're being so fierce right now around AI and copyright protection because that's what they sell is people's copyrights, right? So like that's what I sell for my business. Technically, I am, creating copyrighted material that my authors will then use as their own. That's what I sell. So for me, the real decision between which way you want to publish your book, which way is right for you to publish your book is really up to you. I love traditional for entrepreneurs. I love traditional for experts. And I'm going to get into why in a future episode, but if you don't want to grow an audience, then self-publishing and hybrid publishing can be really great options, right? You're here for your dreams. You're listening to this podcast for your dreams. So I want to be truthful. I want to tell you that because it is the truth. I've had authors be very successful through all three avenues of traditional publishing, self-publishing, and hybrid publishing. And I've had people be really fucking unhappy with their decisions in each of those realms as well. My goal is to help you make the best choice for you. And one of the reasons I actually started this podcast was to help educate folks on the process. I'm going to be honest and say that I used to try to convince folks to not self-publish, but then I went to therapy. And seriously, though, everybody's path is different. You're going to be the most successful when you follow what your intuition and what your dreams tell you to follow, right? So just make sure that you're really thinking through all your options and make sure you know sort of what the lay of the land is, right? So to conclude all of this rambliness, it's super rare that you can get a traditional deal after self-publishing, which is the biggest downside to self-publishing, in my opinion. Hybrid publishing can often be an awesome option for those who want to publish professionally, but on their own timeline and with full creative control. But for many, a traditional book deal is a business decision and a lifelong dream, which makes building a platform and hiring somebody like me worth it. So think about all those options. Let me know what you think. Leave me a voicemail. What are your questions? What are your thoughts? What are your concerns? Why do you think you're the exception to everything I've said so far in this podcast? Love to hear it. Love to hear from you. If you want some better karma, go ahead and write a review, leave me a note, send me an email. Everything you need for all of that is in the show notes. And until next time, cheers to your success.